A cowboy stared at the woman who stepped off the train, glanced at the photograph in his pocket, and said something that made everyone on the platform stop and listen. The brass key slipped from Sadie's frozen fingers and clattered across the wooden floorboards as the wind slammed the station door open. A cloud of dust swept through the room. Across from her, the tall cowboy lowered his gaze to the letters she carried, then to her face. Around them, travelers shuffled past, boots thudding against the platform, but neither moved. He already knew she wasn't the woman he had been waiting for. The question was why he still hadn't walked away. If this opening pulled you in, let me know where you're watching from before we begin. The wind hit Sadie Harper the moment she stepped down from the train. It came racing across the Colorado plains, carrying dust, cold air, and the smell of dry grass from somewhere beyond the horizon. She tightened her grip on the worn leather bag hanging from her shoulder and waited for the train to disappear. The engine groaned. Smoke drifted across the platform. Then it was gone. Just like that, she was alone in Red Canyon. For a moment she stood still, listening to the sounds of the town. Wagon wheels rattled over hard-packed dirt. A blacksmith's hammer rang somewhere down the street. A dog barked behind a feed store. Inside her bag were 6 letters, every one of them addressed to a man she had never met. Cole Bennett. Her sister Violet should have been the one standing here. Violet had written the letters. Violet had promised to come. Violet had fallen in love with a traveling violin player instead. And now Sadie had crossed half the country to clean up the mess. She spotted him before he spotted her. A tall man stood beside a freight wagon near the edge of the platform. Dust covered his boots. His dark coat looked as weathered as the fence posts outside town. He wasn't handsome in the polished way Eastern men tried to be. His face carried years of sun, wind, and hard seasons. When his eyes found hers, she felt strangely exposed. Sadie walked toward him. "Mr. Bennett?" The man looked at her for several seconds. Not rude, not friendly, simply studying. Then he spoke. "You're not the woman who wrote those letters." The words landed harder than she expected. Sadie swallowed. "No, sir." She opened her bag. "My sister Violet asked me to bring these back. She wanted me to apologize. I never intended to." He held up a hand. The apology stopped. The wind moved between them. Cole glanced toward the station, then toward the distant mountains rising blue against the afternoon sky. Finally, his eyes returned to her, to her hands. The calluses left by years of bookkeeping, mending clothes, carrying coal, and doing whatever work needed doing. He noticed everything. Sadie could tell. "I came to explain," she said quietly. "I know." His voice remained calm. Then something unexpected happened. He didn't walk away. He didn't ask for the letters. He didn't look angry. Instead, he said, "How much money do you have?" The question caught her off guard. "Not enough." A faint nod. "As I thought." Another long silence followed. Then he looked toward the west, where dark clouds gathered above distant ridges. Winter was coming. Even Sadie could see that. "I need somebody who knows how to work," he said. His gaze stayed on her hands. "Not somebody who spends their days dreaming." Sadie stared. "I'm not looking for employment." "No." "You were looking for a train home." That stung because it was true. Cole shifted his weight. "The next affordable ticket east won't leave for months." Sadie already knew that. She had counted her money 3 times on the journey. Maybe 4. "A ranch doesn't survive winter on wishes," he continued. "My books are a mess. My supplies aren't where they should be. Ruth McKenna can't do everything alone anymore." He paused. You stay until spring. Sadie blinked. What? You work. His voice remained matter-of-fact. I pay you fairly. The wind lifted a loose strand of her hair. Why would you trust a stranger? For the first time, something almost resembling amusement touched his face. I don't. Then he reached down, lifted her trunk as though it weighed nothing, and started toward the wagon. After several steps, he looked back. You coming? Sadie stood frozen. The smart answer should have been no. The safe answer should have been no. But there was no train, no plan, and no home waiting for her return. Slowly, she followed. The wagon rolled west as the sun dipped lower. Hours later, they reached the top of a ridge. Cole pulled the horses to a stop. Below them spread Cedar Bluff Ranch. Fences leaned at odd angles. Several corrals stood empty. A windmill turned slowly against the darkening sky. Even from a distance, the place looked tired, like a man fighting to stay on his feet. Sadie stared at the ranch, then at the cowboy beside her. For the first time, she began to wonder if she wasn't the only one who had arrived here carrying someone else's disappointment. And as the last light faded across the Colorado hills, Cedar Bluff Ranch waited below them like a question neither of them yet knew how to answer. The ranch looked even worse in daylight. Sadie saw it the next morning when she stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee Ruth McKenna had pressed into her hands. The corrals needed repair. Several fence lines leaned badly. A wagon sat beside the barn with one wheel removed and never replaced. Beyond it all stretched dry pasture land that should have been greener for that time of year. The drought had left its mark. Nothing was completely broken. Everything was simply tired, much like the man who owned it. Ruth stood beside her, tying her apron. He doesn't sleep much. Sadie glanced toward the distant corrals. Cole was already horseback, speaking with two ranch hands. The sun had barely cleared the hills. When does he come in? Sadie asked. Ruth snorted softly. When somebody makes him. That turned out to be true. For 3 days, Sadie hardly saw him. He left before breakfast, returned after dark, ate quickly, spoke little, then disappeared into his study with stacks of papers. The house itself needed attention, not cleaning, organization. The pantry held sacks of flour tucked beside lamp oil. Invoices were shoved into kitchen drawers. Supply orders sat beneath old seed catalogs. Someone had been surviving from one emergency to the next. Sadie understood that kind of life. On the 4th morning, she carried a ledger book onto the porch. Tommy Reed sat nearby with a stick, drawing shapes in the dust. The boy couldn't have been older than 10. Thin shoulders, quick eyes, a face that rarely smiled. What are those? Sadie asked. He shrugged. Letters. She looked closer. Most were backward, some upside down. You know how to read? A little. Who taught you? He pointed toward the barn. Mr. Bennett tried. Sadie hid a smile. Tried. That explained quite a lot. She opened the ledger. How about we both learn something? Tommy looked suspicious, then curious. By afternoon, he was sounding out words while Sadie sorted months of receipts. Feed purchases, horse sales, equipment repairs, freight invoices from Denver. At first, the numbers seemed ordinary. Then something began to bother her. Several debt entries appeared twice. Same amount, same date, different handwriting. She checked again, then again. The figures didn't match. Not exactly. Just enough to feel wrong. That evening, she carried one ledger into the dining room. Cole arrived late. Dust covered his coat. His coffee sat untouched beside his plate while he studied a map spread across the table. Sadie placed the book near him. I think there's a mistake. He glanced up. A mistake? In these debt records? Cole looked at the page, then at her. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, he pulled the ledger closer. You found this today? Yes. His eyes moved over the columns, slowly, carefully. The room grew quiet, except for the ticking clock near the fireplace. Ruth pretended not to listen from the kitchen doorway. Tommy pretended even worse. Cole closed the book. His jaw tightened slightly. I'll look at it. That was all. No praise. No excitement. But he didn't dismiss her. For some reason, that mattered more. The following week, Vernon Pike arrived. Everyone knew when he came. His polished black carriage could be seen half a mile away. The horses alone probably cost more than some ranches. Sadie watched through the window as Vernon climbed down. Perfect coat, perfect boots, perfect smile, the sort of man who never looked dusty even in Colorado. He found Cole near the barn. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. Neither man raised his voice. Yet when Vernon left, Cole's expression looked darker than before. That night, Sadie found another set of suspicious figures, and another. Something wasn't right. Money was disappearing on paper, not in reality, as if someone wanted Cedar Bluff Ranch to look weaker than it truly was. Outside, autumn winds swept across the valley. Winter was getting closer. Inside the house, ledger books piled higher on Sadie's desk, and somewhere within those pages, she had the growing feeling that somebody was quietly preparing a trap. The next big horse sale was only weeks away. According to Cole, it might save the ranch, or finish it. Sadie stared at the numbers long after the lamps were lit. Then she turned another page, and found Vernon Pike's name again. The entry was nearly identical to one she'd already seen. Same amount, same date, different ledger. Sadie sat alone at the dining room table while the house slept around her. The oil lamp beside her hissed softly. Shadows moved across the walls every time the flame shifted. She compared the figures one more time. Something was wrong. Not enough to be obvious. Enough to be dangerous. Outside, the wind scraped dry leaves across the porch. Winter was getting closer, and so was the horse sale. The following weeks passed in a blur of work. Wagons came and went. Cowboys rode out before dawn and returned after dark. Ruth baked bread nearly every morning. Tommy practiced reading from an old newspaper that had arrived wrapped around supplies from Denver. Life at Cedar Bluff Ranch settled into a rhythm. So did Sadie's place within it. No one announced it. It simply happened. One evening, she found a fresh cup of coffee waiting beside her ledger books. No note, no explanation. She glanced through the window. Cole was repairing a gate near the barn. He never looked toward the house, but she noticed the extra cup appeared only on nights she worked late. The horse sale arrived on a cold November morning. Red Canyon bustled with wagons and riders from 3 counties. The main street smelled of horses, leather, wood smoke, and fresh coffee drifting from the cafe near the Mercantile. Cole brought 6 of his finest breeding horses. The animals were the pride of Cedar Bluff Ranch. Strong, fast. The last truly valuable thing he owned. Sadie knew exactly what was riding on the sale. If it succeeded, the ranch might survive winter. If it failed, Vernon Pike would be waiting. By noon, most of the town had gathered near the livestock yard. The deal looked simple. Too simple. Vernon stood beside a polished wagon speaking with businessmen from Denver. His smile never changed. Neither did the gold watch chain hanging from his vest. When the paperwork finally appeared, Cole moved toward a small table outside the stockyard office. A clerk laid out several pages. The crowd shifted closer. Sadie remained near the back. At first, Then she saw a familiar number, a water rights reference. Her stomach tightened. She stepped forward, read again. Then again. The wording was buried deep inside a section of legal language. Easy to miss. Easy to lose forever. Unless someone knew where to look, Cole. He glanced up. The pen paused above the paper. What is it? Sadie stepped closer. Her finger touched one line. This isn't only a horse contract. The crowd quieted slightly. Vernon's smile faded. What are you talking about? He asked. Sadie ignored him. She looked directly at Cole. If you sign this, ownership of the South Spring transfers with the collateral. Several heads turned. Cole frowned. What spring? The one that supplies half your grazing land. Silence. The clerk reached for the papers. Too quickly, Sadie noticed. So did Cole. He took the document back. Read slowly. His expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. The kind of look a man gets when he realizes he almost stepped into a trap. Vernon adjusted his gloves. It was a standard condition. No, Sadie said quietly. It wasn't. Several ranchers moved closer. The mood shifted. People began asking questions. The clerk suddenly found his boots very interesting. Vernon's face hardened. Cole folded the contract, carefully, then handed it back. We're done here. The words landed like a hammer. The sale collapsed. Just like that. A murmur swept through the crowd. Some people looked annoyed, others impressed. A few simply stared at Sadie, not because she had caused a scene, because she had seen something everyone else missed. Cole stepped beside her. Not behind her, not ahead of her. Beside her. A small thing. But everyone noticed, including Vernon Pike. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Vernon laughed once. A short, cold sound. You can delay this all you want. His eyes settled on Cole. Spring is coming. The smile returned. Only this time it carried no warmth. By spring, Cedar Bluff Ranch will belong to me. The threat hung in the air long after he walked away. The crowd slowly scattered. The afternoon felt colder than before. Cole stood looking toward the mountains, hands in his coat pockets. Silent. Finally he turned. His eyes found Sadie's. For a moment she thought he might say thank you. Instead he gave a slow nod. A gesture so small another person might have missed it. Sadie didn't. Back at the ranch that evening, darkness settled early. The first real snow clouds gathered over the distant peaks. Tommy fell asleep beside the fireplace. Ruth mended a shirt near the lamp. The house felt unusually quiet. A rider arrived just after supper, mail from town. Sadie accepted the bundle and carried it to the table. Several invoices, a newspaper, one personal letter. The handwriting stopped her cold. Violet. Her sister's name stretched across the envelope. Sadie stared at it for several seconds, then slowly sat down. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season drifted across Cedar Bluff Ranch. The letter felt heavier than paper should. Sadie turned it over once before breaking the seal. Ruth glanced up from her sewing, but said nothing. Some things deserved privacy. The room was quiet except for the crackle of the fire and the faint scratching of tree branches against the windows. Sadie unfolded the pages. Violet's familiar handwriting filled every line. The words were cheerful, excited, carefree. She wrote about a small wedding in Kansas, about a rented house above a music shop, about curtains she planned to sew herself, about a husband who played violin in restaurants and church socials. Every page carried happiness. Every sentence carried distance. Near the end, Violet wrote something simple. I finally found where I belong. For a long moment, Sadie stared at those words. Then she folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. Nothing dramatic happened. No tears. No anger. Only silence. The kind that settles deep inside a person. For years, she had organized her life around helping someone else. Now that someone else no longer needed her, the realization followed her for days. The snow deepened. Temperatures dropped. Morning frost turned the ranch white before sunrise. One evening, Sadie carried a lantern to the barn after supper. The horses shifted softly in their stalls. Leather creaked. Warm breath drifted through the cold air. She sat on an overturned feed bucket near the far wall. The letter rested in her coat pocket. The barn felt peaceful, at least until footsteps sounded behind her. Cole entered carrying a saddle and a bundle of repair straps. He noticed her immediately. Neither spoke. He crossed the aisle and sat on a nearby crate. The lantern between them cast long shadows across the floor. For several minutes only, the sound of working hands filled the barn. Buckle, leather, thread. Finally, Cole spoke. Bad news from home? Sadie stared toward the horses. No. He waited. My sister got married. The repair needle paused. That's good. It is. Another silence. A horse nudged its stall door. Snow tapped softly against the roof. Sadie smiled faintly. She found exactly the life she wanted. Cole nodded, then returned to his work. For some reason, that made it easier to continue. I spent years helping her chase it. The words slipped out before she planned them. And now? Cole asked. Sadie looked down at her gloves. I don't know where I'm supposed to be. The leather strap in his hands remained still. For a long time. Then he said something unexpected. My wife thought Colorado would be an adventure. Sadie looked up. Cole rarely spoke about himself. The lantern light caught the edge of his face. Sarah loved stories, he continued quietly. Wild mountains, open country, big skies. A faint smile touched his mouth. The first month she wrote letters every week. The smile disappeared. The first winter changed things. He stared toward the barn doors. The loneliness got harder. Sadie said nothing. Neither did he for a while. Then he added, the fever took her. The baby too. The barn grew very still. No dramatic speech followed. No attempt to soften it. Just the truth, simple and heavy. Cole picked up the strap again. Some losses stay where you leave them. The needle moved. Others follow you. Sadie looked at him differently after that. Not as a cowboy, not as an employer. Just another person carrying something invisible. Outside, winter settled deeper across the valley. Weeks passed. Snow covered the hills. Water buckets froze overnight. The ranch hands wrapped scarves across their faces against the cold. Then the storm arrived. It rolled down from the San Juan Mountains like a living thing. The sky vanished. Wind screamed through the fences. Snow swept sideways across the land. By afternoon, visibility dropped to almost nothing. The horses grew restless, then frightened. Before sunset, a ranch hand burst through the door. Snow covered his shoulders. The south herd's moving. Every chair scraped back at once. Cole was already reaching for his coat. They're heading toward the ridge. That was bad. Everyone knew it. The drifts there could trap animals by the dozens, ruin an entire season. Cole grabbed his hat. His eyes met Sadie's briefly. Just a second. Then he was gone into the storm. The door slammed shut behind him. Hours passed. The wind never stopped. Lanterns glowed in the ranch house windows. Ruth prayed quietly while mending blankets. Tommy sat awake long past bedtime. Midnight came, then 1 o'clock, then 2. One by one, riders returned, exhausted, frozen. But Cole never came back. The room grew quieter each time the door opened without him. Finally, Deputy Hank Fuller entered. Snow clung to his beard. His face told the story before he spoke. We lost his trail near the western draw. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Outside, the blizzard continued to howl across Cedar Bluff Ranch, and somewhere beyond the white darkness, Cole Bennett had vanished. Nobody slept. The kitchen lamps burned through the night. Ruth sat near the stove with a blanket around her shoulders. Tommy had fallen asleep at the table sometime before dawn, his head resting on folded arms. Sadie remained by the window, watching, waiting, listening to the wind batter the house. Every few minutes she imagined she heard hoofbeats. Every time it was only the storm. Just before sunrise, Deputy Hank Fuller stood from his chair. "We'll go again as soon as we can see." Sadie grabbed her coat. Hank frowned. "No." "Yes." The answer came before she could think twice. The deputy studied her for a moment, then glanced toward Ruth. Ruth simply nodded. Neither argued after that. By mid-morning, the snowfall eased enough for travel. 5 riders left the ranch. The world outside had changed completely. Fence posts barely showed above the drifts. Trees bent beneath heavy snow. The trail had vanished. Only instinct and experience kept the horses moving. Hour after hour they searched. The cold found every gap in gloves and coats. Then one of the ranch hands pointed. A broken branch. A hoof mark. A piece of leather caught on a pine limb. The trail. Hope returned all at once. They followed it west toward a narrow draw between 2 ridges, and there they found him. Cole sat against a snow-covered rock wall. His horse stood nearby, exhausted, alive. One leg twisted awkwardly beneath him. Snow covered his coat and hat. But when he saw the riders, he lifted his head. Sadie had never been so relieved to see another human being. For a second, neither spoke. Cole's eyes found hers immediately, almost as if he had expected her to come. "We took our time," Hank called. Cole managed a tired smile. "You always do." The tension broke. Everyone laughed. Even Sadie. The sound felt strange after so many hours of worry. Getting him home took most of the day. The ranch doctor later confirmed the ankle was badly injured, but not broken. Cole would walk again. That was enough. The storm slowly passed. Winter settled into a quieter rhythm. Snow remained on the hills for months. The horses survived. The ranch survived. And life continued. Cole spent several weeks working from his desk instead of horseback. For the first time, he and Sadie shared long evenings over account books. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't. Neither seemed bothered by the silence. One evening, she handed him a corrected ledger. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away immediately. The moment lasted only a second. Still, both noticed. Spring eventually arrived. The snow retreated into the mountains. Grass returned. Fence repairs began. The world felt new again. And with spring came a decision. Sadie packed her trunk. The train east would leave within days. The agreement had ended. She had fulfilled her promise. No one tried to stop her. Not Ruth, not Tommy, not even Cole. That somehow hurt more. Then Vernon Pike made his move. The town hall overflowed with ranchers, merchants, and curious neighbors. Vernon stood confidently at the front of the room. Documents spread neatly across the table. "The debt is overdue," he announced. "The property must be surrendered." Murmurs filled the hall. Many people already believed the outcome was decided. Cole stood quietly. His face revealed nothing. Then Sadie stepped forward carrying a wooden box, the same box of ledgers she had studied all winter. Vernon smiled. At first. The smile vanished when she began speaking. One ledger, then another, then receipts, freight invoices, duplicate entries, altered figures, missing transfers. The evidence stacked higher and higher. By the time she finished, the room had fallen silent. Even Vernon knew it was over. Deputy Hank collected the documents personally. Several witnesses stepped forward. Questions became accusations. Accusations became proof. The scheme collapsed. Months of careful deception disappeared in a single afternoon. Cedar Bluff Ranch belonged to Cole Bennett, and Vernon Pike left town under escort. A week later came the annual spring horse auction. People traveled from every direction. The streets of Red Canyon filled with wagons. Music drifted from the saloon. Children ran between market stalls. Sadie planned to leave the following morning. Her trunk already waited at the station. The auction ended near sunset. The crowd remained gathered. Cole stepped onto the platform beside the auction ring. Conversations slowly faded. He removed his hat, looked across the crowd, then found Sadie standing near Ruth and Tommy. His voice carried clearly. "Most folks here think she came to Colorado because of a mistake." The crowd listened. Cole kept his eyes on Sadie. "But Cedar Bluff Ranch is still standing because of her." No grand speech followed. No dramatic performance. Just the truth. Simple and honest. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small brass key, then crossed the distance between them. The key rested in his palm. "The records office," he said. "Only one person besides me has ever held it." The crowd understood before Sadie did. Silence spread across the auction grounds. Sadie looked at the key, then at him. And suddenly she remembered that first day at the station. The way he had studied her hands. The way he had refused to send her away. Not because he needed another worker. Because he had already seen something worth trusting. Something she hadn't yet seen herself. Her fingers closed around the key. A slow smile touched Cole's face. The kind that rarely appeared. Tommy cheered first. Ruth laughed second. The rest of the crowd followed. Months later, new fences stretched across the ranch. A small schoolhouse frame rose near the workers' cabins. One evening, Sadie stood on a hillside holding a set of building plans. Cole carried blueprints for a new horse barn. They disagreed immediately. The school comes first. The barn comes first. The school, the barn. The argument lasted until sunset. Neither surrendered. Neither seemed interested in winning. Below them, Cedar Bluff Ranch spread across the valley. Alive. Growing. Home. The last light faded across the Colorado hills. Neither moved. And for the first time in a very long while, neither of them was carrying someone else's disappointment. They were building something of their own. When I think about Sadie standing on that train platform months earlier, holding a bag full of letters that were never meant for her, I can't help but wonder what I would have done. Maybe you wonder the same thing. If you had been the one left holding the pieces of someone else's broken promise, would you have turned around and gone home? Or would you have found the courage to step into a future you never planned for? What stays with me isn't the storm, the missing cattle, or even the fight to save the ranch. It's the quiet moments. A cup of coffee left beside a ledger, a lantern glowing in a barn, a key placed in someone's hand because they had earned trust, one ordinary day at a time. Sometimes the life we hoped for slips away. Sometimes the people we thought needed us move on. And in the empty space that follows, we discover something unexpected. Not a perfect ending, not a fairy tale. Just a place where we are seen, valued, and welcomed as we are. Maybe that's what healing looks like. Not forgetting the past, not erasing the hurt, just finding someone willing to build the next chapter beside you. I'd love to know your thoughts. If you were Sadie, would you have stayed at Cedar Bluff Ranch or boarded that train home? And if stories like this remind you that hope can arrive in the most unexpected ways, I hope you'll join us again. There are still many journeys waiting beyond the next horizon, and I'd be honored to share them with you.